You can introduce yourself.
I can.
The vice president of our congregation.
Oh, wow. Very official. For those of you that I have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Phil Leek, and my wife Michelle and I have been members for 6 years, and these are our 3, dare I say, beautiful children? He's dying to be up here with me.
Very sweet children.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you this morning. I'm here to, well, it's actually, I'll back up a little bit. When Nancy asked me to do this, she started with, can I ask you something personal? And it was about the up close, you know, I kind of knew where the conversation was going with the up close and personal. I said, oh, you want me to tell my 9/11 story? She goes, no. She goes, I heard you played baseball overseas. And I was like, oh yeah, I did. That's right, I did. So I'm going to talk about two distinctly different things today, 2 very different chapters in my life. The first on the left, that's actually me about 30 pounds ago. I played baseball at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and I was blessed with the opportunity to play overseas twice. That particular picture is from a tournament I played in the Czech Republic in 1995, and then as a freshman in college in 1991, I had the opportunity to play in Moscow, Russia. 2 amazing opportunities for you know, the children in the crowd. There are no children in the crowd. For the college kids in our church, I highly recommend overseas travel. It gives wonderful perspective, and it certainly gave me perspective. Everybody knows the image on the right. Those are the North and South Tower. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, I was in the South Tower. And I just want to preface by saying there's some images here in the PowerPoint that I'm doing that they're a little disturbing. They're disturbing to me. They're you know, pictures of the plane colliding and things of that nature. I just didn't know how I could best present it in any other way than to show those images. So I apologize in advance if anybody is disturbed by those. Just a little bit about me real quick. I grew up, I am a Yankee, yes. I grew up on Long Island, New York, at a town way, way out on the island called Center Moriches. I guess as the crow flies, it's about 70 miles from Manhattan, that little red island there, 70 miles due east of Manhattan. I often refer to Center Moriches as a town that, you know, you blink and you pass on the way out to the Hamptons. And people go, oh, you grew up in the Hamptons? I go, no, 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 no. I waited on them and served them drinks, and I made great money off of the wealthy out there, but it was really a great childhood. Loved Long Island, loved, as you can see, proximity to the bay and the ocean. We, as kids, constantly did things on the water. So it was really a beautiful upbringing. At a very early age, I loved all things that were baseball. My mom reminded me of recently where I used to take piano and voice lessons from Mrs. Jurgowitz, right, Mom? Mrs. Jurgowitz had these, you know, thick Coke bottle-ish glasses and this very operatic voice, and she used to come to the house and teach piano and voice lessons. And Mrs. Jurgowitz drove this this great big Oldsmobile, burgundy Oldsmobile, and she taught a girl down the road. And I didn't really like taking piano and voice lessons at the time. I would have much rather been playing baseball. So I used to stand at the end of my driveway and look down the road to see if Mrs. Jurgowitz was pulled up in the driveway of the other girl, Stacy Boyle. And if she wasn't there, I gave her 5 minutes, 5-minute Time window. If she wasn't there, I was gone. I was out playing baseball. So as I grew, I didn't really realize how good I was, and I don't think you really figure out how good you are at sports until sort of middle school age, and I started to get better and better. And it wasn't until I converted to becoming a catcher that I started to get the attention of college programs, and ultimately I got recruited and settled on Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. So I attended Johns Hopkins in 1991 to 95, and as I alluded to earlier, we had the opportunity to travel to Moscow in 1991 to play in a tournament with 3 other teams. There was a Russian team that was representative that was made up of some of their Olympic players, although they didn't have much of an Olympic team at that sport because baseball was very new to the Russians. And then we played a team from Tokyo, Japan, Tokai University. They were amazing. I'm convinced to this day that they had professional players on their team. They were a university, Tokai University, Tokyo, Japan, and then Yonsei University, Seoul, South Korea. Incredible programs, very disciplined, all about the honor of athletics in baseball. In fact, as you can imagine, a tournament in Russia, we didn't have the best of umpires. And the Japanese team thought they were being dishonored. So the Japanese coach pulled all the players off of, and there was like a 15-20 minute dispute going on. I imagine how that mediation went between a Russian and a Japanese. There was probably a language barrier, and then my coach tried to get involved in English. So anyway, we got the tournament underway, and it was a great time. So there's some pictures of us. That's us with the Tokai University team. On the right, that's the entire group in front of St. Basil's. Red Square, we stayed at a hotel right off of Red Square, which was an amazing experience. A lot of fun. But it was a sad time too in the history. 1991, they were going through a huge economic transition, a huge political transition. And people were sort of thrown to the wolves as to how they were going to make money. And we would come out of the hotel in Tourist right off of Red Square, and people were standing out in lines selling whatever they could basically out of their cupboards. There were a lot of street kids, Russian mafia involvement with the street kids. So it was just an eye-opening experience for an 18-year-old kid from Long Island, New York. It was a lot of fun. That's the tournament poster on the left, and that is a picture, and I apologize for the quality of these photos because they're taken with an iPhone. Photos that I found, this is 1991 technology, right? So the photo on the left is a literal photo I took with an iPhone. But you see these great big buildings, these Stalin-esque huge spire buildings that are overshadowing the baseball field. It was just a really interesting photo that I took. The facilities were wonderful. This was our locker room. There's one guy that I think just he's nothing on. He'd probably kill me if he, anyway. So those are some more team pics. That was just before the parade. It had a beautiful parade that they processed out. They had a military band and we all processed out onto this great big field. Great time. 1995. Had the opportunity to go back overseas with Johns Hopkins University and played. It was really cool actually because NCAA in my senior year had just changed the rule where previously college teams could only travel every 5 years, and in my senior year they changed it to every 3, so I was very fortunate to be able to travel both my freshman and my senior year overseas. So in 1995 we played in a tournament in Prague, Czech Republic. They had just gone from Czechoslovakia to Czech Republic, so it was an amazing time in Prague. And that is the baseball tournament on the left. We played a team, there's Johns Hopkins University, you can see, sort of make out. We played a team from Schenectady. Odd. Rotterdam Orioles from the Netherlands, which was very cool, and I'll tell you a funny story about that. And then the Czech Republic team, they were just a bunch of guys, some of the guys actually played on the Olympic team, and they were very good. They ended up winning the tournament. They did a good job. So that's the field that we played on, and again, it was right smack in the middle of this residential community. But that was an amazing experience as well, and Prague is just a wonderful city. We had a lot of fun, and I highly recommend that city to go to. So the funny story about the Rotterdam team is there was an article done shortly after we got back, and it was done in the Baltimore Sun, which is the local Baltimore paper, and I'm quoted in here. Leek 22 said, let me back up a little bit. So anyway, I had a girlfriend at the time, and Leek 22 said, I've thought about that every hour. So there was a question put to me of, my understanding is that there's a lot of US guys that went over and played in Rotterdam professionally. And my response was, I've thought about that every hour I've been here. I've met some of the Americans on the Rotterdam team. They played college ball, then came over here and decided to stay here and play. I may do the same thing. My girlfriend was not happy about that comment. Needless to say, that relationship didn't last. But she came back and she saw it and she goes, what do you mean? So anyway, that's just a funny aside there. So here's the team. We had much less representation in the second trip to Prague. And that's me. I think that's probably the only hit I actually got during the tournament. Because again, 22, 23 years old, and the exchange was 20 korunas to a dollar. And pivos, beers, were 25 cents. So I was, sorry, Mom. I was 22 years old. I was having a good time in Prague, Czechoslovakia. So here's a beautiful picture of the Charles River, Wenceslas Square, amazing, amazing history in Prague. Beautiful, beautiful time. Okay, so here we go. After I graduated in 1995, my intention was to go to law school, and took a year off, worked in a law firm, took the LSATs, did pretty well enough to get into a couple of good law schools, but I needed to make money to pay rent in the interim. And I took a job selling life and health insurance. That was rough. Constant cold calling, and anyway, I looked up in the alumni database for Hopkins, okay, who else is in the insurance industry? So I found a gentleman by the name of Nick Cortese, who is now, to this day, an extremely powerful insurance guy, very successful insurance guy. And he hired me on, and the rest is history. I never made it to law school. So I stayed in the insurance industry, but I always had a longing to get back to New York. And I struggled with the decision for a long time. And let me clarify, I took my first insurance job in Baltimore, Maryland, and I always wanted to get back to get back north to New York. And I eventually made it back to New York in 1998. And I took an apartment in Brooklyn, New York, sight unseen. My sister looked at it and checked it out. And 2 blocks, I think, from where she lived, so that was pretty cool. And I worked in a small firm in downtown New York City, right on John Street, which was very exciting. I mean, working in the financial district of New York City for a 20-something was awesome. I thought I had made it. So then I met a woman who worked with a company called Aon Risk Services. Aon Risk Services, #2 insurance broker in the nation, and I thought, wow, I've really made it. That's the big leagues. So I got an opportunity to work with Aon Risk Services, and Aon Risk Services was in 2 World Trade Center. My first job with Aon was on the 92nd floor of 2 World Trade Center. So here's my business card, obviously, and here's my World Trade Center ID. Alexander, look, I had hair. It was going, but I had hair.
You did, I promise you.
So that's my World Trade Center ID. On the morning of 9/11/2001, I was working on, I had moved up to a different division, the Mergers and Acquisitions Division of Aon Risk Services, and I moved up to the 100th floor. So I was getting higher up in the building. And it was amazing. If any of you had been to the World Trade Center, it was an acre. Each one of these floors was an acre. I mean, there were people that presumably I'd worked with for a year that, you'd meet after. I didn't know you worked on the same floor as I did. I mean, the place was huge, huge. Thousands and thousands of people worked in there. Each floor was an acre. It was very common for the building to sway because of the wind a little bit. I'd heard those stories about that when I first started. It was very common to see helicopters and even small planes flying below your eye level, because those buildings were they were huge. So it was an amazing experience. The views were, as you can imagine, just unbelievable. So this is where I preface by saying some of these images are going to be disturbing, but there's no other way to. So 8:46 a.m. on the morning of 9/11/2001. I was, again, working on the 100th floor. I had a huge project due that Friday. It was a Tuesday, so I was in early, very early. And I don't know if you've heard the accounts, but one of the reasons why, I hate to phrase it this way, but it was an attack, right? And it was a very calculated military attack by people that felt that they were doing something that was good to their God. Anyway, if more people had been earlier, they would have taken many more lives. And the fact that there weren't many people in at the time that they did this is just an incredible blessing. So I was there. I was sitting at my desk on the 100th floor. I was on the phone at the time. And the building just shakes violently. Again, I'm in the South Tower. This is the North Tower that got hit first. So my office was an interior office on the 3rd floor. The North Tower is the one with the antenna. So I'm on the South Tower, and mine was an interior office. When the first plane hit, I immediately went to the conference room that gave me the best vantage point to see what the heck was going on. And I could see immediately, I went to the conference room and I saw immediately flames and smoke and papers, and that's one of the things that really stands out that day, is there were just papers everywhere. So I'm looking down and see the flames, the smoke, the papers. My boss yells out, "Everybody get to the stairs." I had worked at that point. I was with Aon and in the building for a year, and I didn't know where the emergency stairs were. I just didn't. I had no clue. I don't think we ever did a fire drill. I wasn't told where they were, but that's another issue entirely. So I followed the folks to the emergency stairwell, and again, entry on the 100th floor. And initially, the descent down the stairs was fairly calm. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody had any idea what was going on. I certainly didn't have any idea what was going on. Cell phone service was impossible. There were some people that were able to get through and said, I think a Cessna may have hit the building. They don't quite know what happened. So again, the descent down the stairs, I have pictures. So this is the stairwell. I mean, this building was built in 1973. So that's an actual interior shot of the stairwell, and I'm a big guy. You couldn't fit two across. So narrow stairway, very, very slow evacuation process. And there were numerous times where there were bottlenecks on the stairs. This is another diagram that I pulled up from the New York Times. So this shows you there are only 3 stairwells in the South Tower. And whether you lived or perished was highly contingent upon which stairwell you chose. I chose stairwell A, which is here in green, which is why I'm standing before you today, among other reasons. So the stairwell, as you can see, comes down. So Aeon, the whole building is about 110 floors. I entered, I guess, about here and just started the descent down. So this is an article from USA Today where they talk about the miracle of Stairway A. Again, here's an interior of the stairwell. And as we were progressing down the stairs, more and more people were coming into the stairwell in complete and just panic, very emotional, and it was confusing for me because I thought, what is this? What is this is going on? I had no idea what was going on. So to see those people enter just got me more and more panicked. So here's another interior shot. And again, the initial evacuation was very orderly and very methodical, and people just, got out at a pretty decent pace. There were a few bottlenecks like you see here. And of course, everybody, this is a very famous shot. I did see 2 firemen coming up. This is a very famous one that somebody snapped. I did see 2 firemen coming up, and the looks on their face were very similar to this gentleman's face. So this, I wanted to share this with you because as we're descending down the stairwell, so the World Trade Center had express elevators. Express elevators would go up to the 78th floor. You were up to the 78th floor in 60 seconds. And then you would transfer to local elevators. I think there are 4 or 5 local elevators. You can use 78 to 88, 88, 98, and 98 and above. So as we're evacuating the South Tower, we come to this area. This is the 78th floor sky lobby. And this area right here, this is the best picture I could find on the internet. The emergency stairs are back this way. So as we were coming down...
Celia wants to talk to you.
Oh, I don't want to talk to her. So come out, peer my head around. There are hundreds of people waiting for the elevator to go down. Hundreds. I know of accounts of 2 or 3 people, one of which is an Aeon employee, that survived the 78th floor. The way the plane came in the second strike is it went right through that 78th floor sky lobby. So, the majority of the people that were standing there waiting, they perished. They went during the second strike. And if it wasn't for a gentleman by the name of Henry Jennings, who I call every September 11th, old Navy guy, I initially evacuated with him, and I very seriously contemplated standing there and waiting for the express elevator down, and Henry Jennings basically grabbed me by the nape of my neck and said, "No, let's get out of here. Let's keep going down." So I kept going down. So at this point, 9:03 a.m., and I have this conversation with everybody I've told my story. I have it with Michelle, and I always sort of lose track of where I was in the evacuation process. My best recollection is at the time of the second plane striking the South Tower, I was high 40s, low 50s. If you see these lines here, those are where the elevator banks. So that's 44, that's 78. So you see where the plane's coming in, right there at 78, which is where all those people perished. So to think that I was 25 floors below the impact zone to this day, it's very difficult. It's surreal to me. All of this is really surreal. I know I was a part of it, but I feel so removed from it. I feel, I think I was telling Janet earlier, it's not my story. I mean, it is my story, but I don't feel right in telling it sometimes, just because, what was I saying? Because I was a victim.
Happened to you, you didn't choose to go.
Yeah, the first part of my presentation was an accomplishment, right? I mean, I worked hard to become a baseball player. I was a victim of this. And I know it's a miracle of God that I'm standing here today. I know that. And it's difficult to call myself a survivor, but I am. But it's just, it's tough for me to tell the story just because I don't feel right telling it. I mean, I lost a lot of friends on 9/11. Aon lost 175 employees. I lost my assistant. I lost the broker that worked next to me. And I lost the woman who hired me, who was 6 months pregnant at the time. Jennifer Dorsey. So the point of impact. Okay, so the point, you know, I'm walking down, it's fairly orderly evacuation, and I have I remember this like it was yesterday. I was had a firm grasp on the handrail going down, and when that second plane hit, it threw me across the stairwell, and I maintained my footing, but the building was going like this. So frankly, I didn't know which end was up. I didn't know if I was falling, if the building was falling. It was just very disorienting to feel that. And that just, chaos, panic, people pushing, people screaming, people yelling, trying to get out as fast as they could from the building. Again, to think that force, how close I was to it, 20, 25 floors, to this day just boggles my mind. So I'll back up a little bit. So as I said, it was just, you know, the very chaotic evacuation process. And, you know, there was enough time. I mean, it took me, from a timing perspective, I was in the stairwell on 100 by, I would say approximately, so the first plane hits 8:46. I was in that stairwell 8:48 and 30 seconds. And frankly, that is just the difference between living that day and passing, because if there was any hesitation whatsoever, you couldn't, and I didn't, and you know, thanks to some of my colleagues, thanks to the Lord for guiding me down the tower. So my point in going back to that time frame, 8:48 and a half, 9:03, I had descended probably 50 stories between, what is that timing, 8:48 and 9:03, 15, 16 minutes. We were moving at a good clip. I think it took 10 to descend the remaining 50. So again, it was just complete and utter chaos, people pushing. I remember distinctly a little guy that was behind me pushing, and I'm thinking, guy, come on, we're out of this. And it wasn't till about the high 20s, there was this rush of air that came up through the stairwell, that I knew I was going to make it out. I just felt confident. I felt this fresh air. You know, you had the taste of outdoor. I was going to get out. I was going to get out. I was going to get out. And I eventually got down to the plaza or street level. Every single window facing the north tower, so everything that was facing east. All those windows were just completely blown out. That's what accounted for the rush of air coming up through the stairwell, because just, you know, it was completely open. The debris between the north and the south tower plaza was just unbelievable. Just piles and piles of debris and parts and papers. So they had us descend below. If any of you had been to the World Trade Center had a huge mall area underneath, huge mall area. The subways came in there, PATH train came in there, tons of retail stores, a bunch of restaurants. So they had us descend down the escalator to go down to the mall area. And oddly enough, they had us go back through the mall area and evacuated us. So the evacuation, this is South Tower, went down through the mall area, had us evacuate. There was a Borders bookstore right here. I remember that. In World Trade Center, I think that's 5. Had us evacuate this way. So we crossed over, that's Vesey Street, and I banged a right and came up Church Street. Oh, and I forgot a good story. I had lost track of all the people that I was evacuating with, of course, I mean, in all the chaos. There was a group of like 4 or 5 of us that had gone on the stairs together. In all of the chaos, lost track of them. It was at this point where I saw the first Aeon employee that I had recognized. And he was bloodied and singed. The back. Couldn't understand why. And I was able to help him get to an ambulance. It was pretty cool when we reunited like 3 weeks later to hear his story, and I'll tell you that in a second. So I walked him, we went across Vesey Street, as I said, and I walked him to an ambulance, and I came to Church Street, and I remember turning and looking from my vantage point. I could see this huge gaping hole in the side of World Trade Center 1. And there were people everywhere just watching. And I'm thinking, first thing that came to mind, not safe for you guys to be here, number one. My second thought was, how are they ever going to put that fire out? How are they going to get up there and put that fire out? And then I witnessed 2 or 3 people jumping, and that was enough for me. I said, I gotta get off. I was determined to get off the island of Manhattan. Again, I was living in Brooklyn. I'm just gonna hoof it and get the heck off the island of Manhattan. So I went back down. I had a buddy that worked at Cedar Street.
Where we grew up.
I grew up on Cedar Street. I'm just making that connection now. So I walked over to Cedar Street to see if his office was open. Everything was shut down. I mean, it was shut. Let me back up. I actually went down first to try